Welcome to the Wild Marriage Podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. We're so glad you decided to join us for today's episode, Communication Breakdown.
And no, we're not talking about the Led Zeppelin song. So we wanted to do a podcast specifically wrapped around communication just because of the fact that it's one of the big deal breakers, communication, sex, and money. But more than anything, I just feel like we have a different take on it. I feel like not a different take, like we're going to say something that you've never heard before, but hopefully maybe we say something that causes you to think in a manner that you haven't thought before, or maybe rethink what you've thought before in your mind. The three types of communication specifically are known as, verbal, written, and visual. And there's others types of communication, but the three that we're going to talk about is those three. The other thing we're going to talk about is active listening, and I bring that up not because the other ones don't have, but if you're actively listening or actively hearing what somebody's saying, there's just a whole nother facet to your life if you're really paying attention and you're not actively looking at something else. Like I can't look at you and hear what you're saying while I'm, I don't know,
playing a game
doing
on my
or
phone.
something, or ticker talking and stuff
Guilty.
like that. Yeah. You're not, if you're not paying attention. So let's back it up, go back into start from the top here. So oral communication, verbal stuff that I'm speaking out of my mouth, pretty self-explanatory. The one thing I don't want to hit on everything that we talk about and say, well, this is so powerful. But the reality is, think about this. When we're talking about verbal communication, the Word of God says God spoke and it was. Mm-hmm. That to me is says it all. I don't need to even expound. But do you feel like verbal communication is more or less effective, or let me say, when you're getting your point across or trying to get your point across, do you feel better when you're verbally communicating, or do you feel like there's something else that works better for you, or do you feel like you're effective?
Well, so the company I work for, they're really big on mindful communication. So in every form of communication, they want you to spend a lot of time thinking about what you're going to say and being intentional about what you're going to say. And so I feel like in that position, my nonverbal or my written communication has grown exponentially. However, I always feel like the best method of communication is going to be the verbal communication. And the reason being is because my tone, my delivery, but what's coming behind the words are obvious. They're more obvious, I should say. Nonverbal communication, there's too much left to interpretation. And it's more often than not, when I'm reading something, I read it based on how I feel. And so whoever's reading my nonverbal communication is probably doing the same thing. So for me, I would have to say verbal communication. I would much rather have a conversation with you this way rather than this way.
But you feel like you're getting your point across either way. Like you feel like you're effective at it, and you feel, like you have a good delivery. I think that's something that's lost today. Like, remember we did the love languages book, and words of affirmation was one of the love languages. And of course, that is something spoken, something that not only somebody's got to speak, but somebody else has got to hear. And I think we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, or at least I hit on it, that we were going to have a conversation about that specifically. But it's almost like I want to say like a lost art, but verbally communicating nowadays is kind of giving way to, text messaging and even like,
emojis as opposed to words.
and pictures like Snapchat and stuff like that. These are all ways that people are communicating nowadays, but also they leave things open, very wide to a range of communication, or at least interpretation. I mean,
interpretation. Yeah, absolutely.
That can be misguided or misled at times, but
yeah.
You were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, you hit on it, that in today's society, people more often than not are more interested in doing the text messaging or the emailing and that DMing, IMing, depending on what platform you're using and which social media you're on. But either way, people are more interested in that that text and type communication than they are actually having a conversation with people. And I think to some degree, we're losing the ability to have productive conversations this way.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. When I'm trying to communicate with some people, like sometimes it's people at work that I come across, or just in the world in general, especially if I'm trying to have a conversation that may be a little pointed or
Uncomfortable.
Yeah, something. I don't set out to be combative or cause conflict or whatever. But sometimes things that people say hurt your feelings or mess with your feelings or vice versa. And then all of a sudden, because I haven't communicated verbally, in a while or like that before, in that moment, now all of a sudden it's tough.
Yeah.
But, it's something that people, certainly need to practice, because words can be misconstrued, actions, things like that. But verbal communication, having a direct, I'm in your face and I'm telling you this is how I feel, and giving you an opportunity to kind of reciprocate what you're feeling and come back, and kind of counteract what I'm saying. Those they're important. We're getting ready to go away and have like a little getaway, just Lisa and I, and that's one of the things that we're going to do in that moment, or in that weekend that we're going to be away. We're going to be having a very face-to-face conversation about all of the different things that are going on in our life, things that we may need to like rethink or retool or whatever. And it's going to be verbal. I'm not going to, I thought about writing you a love letter, to be honest with you, but
you could do that.
I might do that still, but
I'm glad you told me, because if I showed up without one, I feel bad.
I know now I set myself up for failure, because now the expectation is there's going to be some type
You
of
said it.
like pillow talk love letter.
You said it verbally.
Maybe I'll title my letter. All right, listen, we can't get hamstrung here on the verbal communication. I do want to talk about also the other ones. So let me just kind of push on a little bit, but nonverbal communication. And this is not because I'm not going to say this about everything that we talk about, but again, I think that there's a lot to nonverbal communication. And you say, well, what do you mean, Chris? Well, nonverbal communication isn't just what I'm saying. Hear what I'm trying to convey. It's, nonverbal communication is me not talking to you. It's everything that I'm not saying. It's everything that everything that you're doing, it's communicating to someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The looks on your face, the way you dress, your body language. There is so much to nonverbal communication. It's not funny, and I don't have time to unpack it. But hear me, everything you do, somebody is watching, somebody's paying attention. Mm-hmm. Your body language right now, your eyes that are looking at me, those eyes like, oh man, I'm in love with you. That I can see that right now. Trust me, I can see it. It's there. I'm not making this up. But you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And if I'm not conscious of that and I'm not paying attention, or I'm not aware, or I don't think, I've never thought about that before. I've never thought about how my body language affects other people. How does that make them feel about me, about the circumstance, about the situation? When you walk into the room and my posture is a certain way, what does that say about me? Does that say that I'm confident in what I'm doing? Does it say that, can you automatically look at me and say, oh, he's having a rough day? You know what I'm saying? I want to be not having a rough day.
No, but when you are, it's you wear it. I can say that you do.
You want to go home?
I mean, eventually, yes, but I do too. I'm the same way. I
didn't just call you out. There's people going to watch this and be like, oh, Chris is moody.
No, I'm not saying you're moody, but you do when you are having a bad day, or there's something that's warring in your mind, or that you're battling.
Something warring in my mind right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to distract you.
Okay, well, you already did. So just continue on with the onslaught.
Well, so all that being said, what do you think it is the most important thing for someone to consider with nonverbal communication? What should they be most attentive to?
That's it right there. And when you say attentive, I'm not saying give it 100% of your thought process. I'm not saying let it control you and dictate your every move. What I am saying though is be conscious of it.
Yeah.
Be aware that everything that you're doing is being. Look, we live in. There was a movie about this in the 90s, the Terminator, Judgment Day. And we talk about it from the pulpit all the time. Judgment Day is coming. We live in Judgment Day.
In the natural
everybody,
society.
Yeah, everybody you come across, whether they say it or they don't, they're judging you. They're judging your thoughts. They're judging your actions. You say, oh, how are they judging my thoughts? Believe me, it's all over your face. Your body language, that your thoughts are conveyed in that way. So be aware of it. That's really the best thing that I can say is be aware. How much do you let your actions control your thought process? And how much does your thought process and your actions control the nonverbal communication?
The way you present yourself.
Yeah.
Even the way you come across.
Even the way I dress, like, when I was I weighed a little bit more than I do now. I dressed in a way that tried to hide the things that I was uncomfortable about. Now, I literally walk around in the nude.
That's not true. We're not that kind of couple.
I'm just saying, in my mind, that's how I feel. Like I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof because
it's a different level of confidence.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it shows. I'm sure that people notice those things. They see it because you wear it like a crown.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think all in all, across the board, and use this word so often, and I don't, want people to get tired of hearing it, but it's the intentionality behind it.
I don't even think that's a word.
Well, if it's not, I made it up, and I like it.
You're gonna own it?
Yep. I'll take credit.
Lisa makes up words. Welcome to my world.
That's okay. But either way, being intentional. And so you ask the question, how much does your body language or your actions control your thoughts? I think, and the other way around, thoughts controlling your actions. I think it's more the thoughts controlling the actions. And I think it's those thoughts that we allow to stay there and linger that then take root, and then it expresses itself through our body language, for sure.
Well, even before this podcast, even before the communicating this, before you even looked at the notes or anything, is this something that you honestly had thought about before?
No. I think you just kind of go through life and you present yourself the best you can, for the most part. There are times where I'm in certain situations and I really don't want to be there or be in that situation, but I will forcefully put a smile on my face and hold my shoulders up and push through and make it through that situation in that time.
Okay.
But as a norm, no, I don't think it's something that I was at the forefront of my mind.
Okay, fair enough. So let's get back to the list here. In written communication, or well, I guess written, texting, typing, emailing. We email a lot.
So relevant.
We email
these
a lot.
days.
I probably, hopefully, no, I don't want to say that. Praise the Lord. There's probably nobody. I know. That's a moment right there. Y'all just caught it right
that
there.
Was special.
There's a special filter that just happened. I was gonna say something along the, I know people eventually, whether they do now or later on, people that I work with or, work for, or whatever, they're going to, hear this, but I probably email my wife more than anybody in reality. We're constantly communicating back and forth. It could just be a little note about what we're doing that day. She comes across my mind, and I just send her a little note. Hey, I love you. I'm thinking about you. I'm proud of you. I hope you're having a blessed day. And things are going, right. Whatever that is. What are we having for dinner? What time are you getting off work? I mean, we just talk back and forth, bang, 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 all day long. And I know people like they could go like days without communicating, and they're cool with that. And I'm like, I'm not possessive. I'm not jealous. I'm not concerned of your,
No.
infidelity.
Yeah, it's not. It's
really
just a matter
I
of
really
we're
like you
thinking
a
about each
lot.
other.
And I want to, I just want to communicate with you. I can't, I'll tell on myself.
When he
When it-
says that, I get very nervous.
When it comes to communication, no, this is very real.
Okay.
So when I went through a break in service in my military career, when I got back in, I had to attend this training course, and we were allowed to have our cell phones during the time that I was there. And there was a moment during the training that someone got in trouble or something happened. And at this point, as a punishment, they decided that they were going to come through, and basically there was no warning. There was like, it wasn't like, hey, this is about to go down. We had no idea. We came back from class. We all lined up in a formation, and, the instructor came out and they were like, okay, here's the deal. And they took our phones at that moment. I was basically, I think I made a very
You
quick
called me
phone call and
quick,
said,
yeah.
hey, this is what's happening, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to talk to you again. And I don't know how long that is. Frankly, I've washed it from my mind. But what I can tell you is
It was several days.
from the time that I was a young man, like a young boy, to how old am I? I'm not that old. But from where I am today in my life, I can tell you this, that probably the hardest few days of my life. Absolutely, positively, without a doubt. Listen to me, it crushed me to emotionally, to know that I was not going to be able to call and say goodnight. I mean, I was bringing like,
Well,
bad
too,
memories.
like think about the number of years at that point that we had been together, even through dating and pre-marriage and everything. There was not a night that went by really that we went to bed without saying goodnight to each other. There's only been twice, and once was when you were at NTC, and once was when you were at that training.
Yeah, so you're talking. So when I went to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California, that was in the year.
That was within a year. It was 2000.
So when you go into the box, and besides the point, this is like free, like modern cell phone. So, there was no cell service out there. Matter of fact, I think you wrote me letters.
It took days for
and
them to
it
get
took
to you.
days and then all of a sudden I got like 5 letters at one time. But it was during that period of time, and then, like you said, during the training. Now you think about the fact that we've been together since
No, since 2000.
Oh yeah, I thought we met in 1999. Okay, so the year,
Giving us an extra year.
So the year 2000, we've gone at that long without not communicating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hearing one another's voice. That's a long time.
But too, that's one of those things that really nurtured our relationship, and really in the beginning, because we were separated because of military. And so we had that no other option but to talk on the phone, and no other option but to write letters to each other. And I think it just really carried into our relationship even to this day, where being able to communicate with each other constantly like that is just super important to us.
Yeah. So I don't want to, I'm glad that there's a good segue into the next section about written communication. Do you think there's anything that comes to the top of your, off the top of your head that when you think about written communication, is there anything that, you think you can convey through writing, maybe that you couldn't through other forms of communication?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the verbal communication is so important either way, and even those things that are non-verbally communicated and written need to be verbally communicated at some point. But if I would never have a tense conversation through text or email. I would never try to communicate something frustrating or stressful using written communication.
Right.
Informative, yes, but anything that requires much thought, much open dialogue between the two of us, I feel like it's important for it to be verbal.
Well, and I hear what you're saying. The one thing that I can think of is the fact that when you are writing, I had this supervisor one time that told me, before you send that, nasty email or make that nasty phone call, of course he was, portraying it in a different light. But before you do that, why don't you write your thoughts down and then wait a few, hours and then go back and read what you wrote and see if you still feel that way. And one of the things that I learned from that was that I could convey my thoughts onto paper and it would help me maybe think through a process or think through my feelings or the message that I was trying to convey. But it does give you a chance to be, I don't know, maybe a little bit, you say it all the time about your words. Once you write them, or once you say them, you can't get them back.
Yeah. Well, we did an episode.
Write something back. I got it like an eraser. I can erase it. Or I can, bang, 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 hit the delete button and get some of those words back.
Yeah.
So there.
Well, we did an episode about that, the equitable investments.
Yeah.
We talked about that. And it's super important. But you're right. There are those things that in the written communication, you do have the opportunity to really mull it over and really just dissect it before you hit that send. But I just think it's important to not leave things to interpretation when it comes to that.
I understand that. And I get where you're coming from. I just feel like there are points or there are things that written communication is good for. Not only for me, the writer, but you as the receiver. I think that there are things that it can help. It can help the process, and it can kind of help you get through that. I know we talked about it in the beginning, so I do want to point out the comment about active listening, and the thing I want to make there, the point I want to make is it's not just listening, but actively communicating. And I say that active listening because I hear that, I see that, people make that comment all the time, but when you think of actively, I want you to think of active communication on both parties, whether I'm writing, whether it's my body language, whether I'm talking about verbal communication. Actively pay attention to what is somebody's trying to communicate. If I'm waving my arms frantically, pay attention to why I might be doing that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm talking to you, don't be thinking about your response. Right. Don't be trying to come up with a rebuttal. Truly hear what I'm saying and then stop. Take a second. It'll help. It really will. Active communication is not just, the art of doing the communication.
Yeah.
Hearing somebody else's thoughts and hearing somebody else's heart is really important. And, I just think that it's something that is kind of gone by the wayside today.
Lost art, if you will.
I feel like, Pastor said this, the generation that's here, the Gen X or Gen Z or,
whichever
millennials or whatever, whatever people I'm not apparently. All I know is this. Pastor says, there's all these like funny memes and jokes and little, jabs poked at these people, but these people are ushering the presence of the Lord. That's just God is moving on the earth right now in a mighty way. And we're seeing something that hasn't, been seen or felt in what appears to be a long time. I haven't been a Christian all my life, but I know from talking to other, people of like mind that this is not the way they have seen, people's hearts moved in a long time. So I am grateful for that. So
Yeah.
I would say that they don't give up on the young folks. So
Amen.
I
Amen.
think that's our time for today.
Yeah. So we're so grateful that you tuned in with us today and listened to our episode, Communication Breakdown. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, like and follow us. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast. You can listen to us on any podcast streaming app. You can check us out on our website, www.thewowmarriage.com. Make sure you send us an email.
Right?
The email is www.
I got her. Look at that. www.thewowmarriage@gmail.com.
So make sure you're sending us feedback. Send us questions at thewowmarriage@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. See you soon.
Have a great day.